Good afternoon, everybody. John Thompson here with Community.Connect, sitting down with Doug Gardenhire from Georgia State University's Respiratory Therapy program. He is the director of that program. It's his second time on the podcast. Thanks for stopping by again, Doug. How you doing?
Everything's great, John. I really appreciate the time. Of course, appreciate everything that you and Community.Connect does for everyone around the world.
Thanks, man. Thanks, I appreciate it. You know, I think we were on about a month ago. It's crazy how time is flying. Tell us a little bit about what's happened since we last spoke. Maybe start what's going on the Georgia State campus.
Well, the last time we spoke, Georgia State had moved all of the spring courses to fully online. And that's where we currently sit today as we are wrapping up the semester. Monday is the last day of the semester and we start finals. So we've moved to all the lectures and all the testing and everything has been fully online. Going forward, we're planning to keep that same format for the summer. So all summer courses will be online. We will be using all the technology that we've had this semester, hopefully putting it to even better use than what we have had. Many folks around the university, this is their very first time teaching at this format. But for the Department of Respiratory Therapy, we've been using this format for a number of years, especially on our master's in respiratory therapy. That program we have a fully online functioning program. So most of our, if not all of our faculty are very well versed in that. So that's the plan. But the good news is that we are a specialty program. Our students need to learn, and they need to learn by touching, especially manipulating individual patients, individual machines. And so this summer starts their first foray into mechanical ventilation. And we have the very first mechanical ventilatory lab. And that has been approved that we will be able to do that face-to-face using some precautions, using CDC guidelines, trying to keep in each room less than 10 or less students in there at a time, or 10 individuals. We're going to be using all of the PPE that the students have been assigned prior at the beginning of the program, so that they can protect themselves. And then we'll also be doing screening for temperatures. So every student, anybody who enters the laboratory at Georgia State in the Department of Respiratory Therapy will have a temperature check before and after. Just trying to, make some precautions, trying to utilize this opportunity to the best of its ability, as we believe, and so do the students. The students really believe that they need that time in person and be able to touch the machinery and learn in that format.
Absolutely. Well, you guys are the program is preparing people who I think now have been revealed as super essential frontline professionals in the world of health. And I'm thankful because we've worked together in Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic. I've seen firsthand the benefit both to local communities, patients that need access to this specialized knowledge and expertise, and I've also seen the benefit to the students. So although I'm disappointed that we were supposed to be in the Dominican Republic in March, again in May. Obviously those plans have changed, but I am thankful, I'm grateful that they and you and the program in general have been able to affect change and really have an impact here in Atlanta and the world. I mean, you have how many graduates that are around the country working on the front lines of the coronavirus pandemic now?
Oh yeah, I mean, Georgia State Respiratory Therapy has been around. We're over 50 years old. I mean, we've got thousands of graduates over that time. We continue to graduate more and more. This semester, we're going to graduate another large group of new practitioners with both a master's and a baccalaureate degree. And I think we're going to have around 45 new individuals hit the open market. And I can tell you that the market is super hot right now for respiratory therapists. It always has been. It's really been a huge need. But it's just, of course, with this, it's even larger than what it was. But respiratory therapy is continuing to grow, and we need more and more good practitioners. So we're going to be graduating another group. And then, of course, we have some of ours that are already practitioners coming back for their master's degree. So we've got another 30 some odd graduates that will complete that degree and then be able to return to either teaching or back to the front lines, depending upon what their plan is after graduating with a graduate degree.
There's this community of respiratory therapists, these practitioners around the world. Obviously, Georgia State is not the only program. Let me ask you: has the academic community of respiratory therapy we're all on a Zoom call how many times a day, right? Has your network of other academic respiratory therapists have you all come together in some way to, I don't know, advise, counsel, state or local governments, or just get together to take stock of what's happening as an academic community?
Well, I think instead of an academic community, I think that's probably on a larger scale of just the respiratory therapy community in general.
Mm-hmm.
We have our international and national group, the American Association for Respiratory Care, the AARC, is the hub for all of that. And so within the AARC, there are also specialty hubs such as education, where we can be in contact with all of our colleagues around the country and around the world, and trying to see what it is that they need help with, what they're doing. Of course, telemedicine is something that's really big right now. Currently something that we are putting in some grants for, to see if we could get some grant money to try to study that specifically in respiratory therapy
Mm-hmm.
in the rural area. So trying to use some of what we see that, not that there's not fantastic respiratory therapists all over the country in urban, suburban, and rural areas, but just the notion of here in Georgia, is there a way that we could take maybe some specialty education, specialty knowledge from, say, a university, and be able to transport that through telemedicine to different areas of Georgia, and especially those in rural areas that may not have as many respiratory therapists, that may need some help in trying to manage mechanical ventilators and care for these type of patients. And of course, later on, I mean, there's always going to be patients that are going to need that care, whether it's COVID-19 or any other virus or any other disease state.
No doubt, I can close my eyes and imagine the impact something like a telehealth program would have in rural communities of Nicaragua or the Dominican Republic and Central America. The access to expert care, specialist care, is one of the biggest challenges to family and even community health. Upper respiratory illness is the most, I want to say popular, but the most common case for patients that we see in our health clinic in Nicaragua. And part of our programming has been driven by that, realizing that it is a priority and that we can mitigate some of the risks and address some of the symptoms by, just pouring a concrete floor that doesn't hold moisture
Right.
and doesn't contribute to mold, things of that nature. Now, as an NGO, we can do a lot of things like that. And, in your role, I know that informing the public, informing society on what's really going on, like the information that they need. Tell me a little bit about how your program has provided some of that information to the general public.
Well, what we're trying to do is trying to get the word out about, respiratory therapists, their specialty, and how special respiratory therapy is at Georgia State and of course around the country and around the world. So I've put in a couple of links to some articles that we have created.
Okay.
The one on the bottom there of I guess it would be the second one, is a lot of information about hearing from some of our graduates, some of our alumni who are working the front lines, and what their day is like, and what it is that they're doing, and how many ventilators they're managing. The second one there is a lot of Q&A, trying to dispel some myths that I think sometimes we may hear from other um, entities, other individuals that may not have quite the perspective, and trying to provide our expertise in making sure individuals understand truly what a mechanical ventilator is, how that works, how a respiratory therapist does that, how much training that goes through into doing that. Here's an important point that I don't think a lot of individuals know. One, just because there's not that many respiratory therapists in the United States, roughly about 150,000, so it's not an everyday name of a healthcare practitioner that people hear, because we are very, very specialized. Just our students alone, because our students alone have 2 different didactic classes, 2 different laboratory classes, and multitudes of clinical experience. These students are getting well over 1,000 hours of formal training on how to use properly manage a mechanical ventilator. There is nobody else anywhere in healthcare, doesn't matter whether that's even all the way to a physician, physicians, nurses, anybody, nobody receives that formal education. If they are receiving any kind of education, it's on the job training.
Mm.
So if it's a physician, they don't have courses that are dedicated to managing the mechanical ventilation. They may have had a class in medical school that deals with understanding the lung anatomy and the lung physiology, but they're learning on the job in their residency and their fellowship about how to properly manage that patient. Where our students, the Georgia State Respiratory Therapy students, they're getting formal training. They've already had the training in lung anatomy, lung physiology. Now they're getting that formal education in how to manipulate all the different controls that are needed to be able to sustain life on a mechanical ventilator. And there's nobody else that's doing that. And that's just that's really a big piece about what respiratory therapists do and what they can do.
Absolutely. Dispelling some of the myths is important. We, in many cases, we're still obsessing over every headline that comes out. What's happening in the world? What's happening in the states? What's happening in our counties? How are we dealing with reopening? And as communities begin to reopen, how do we know that we're taking the right precautions? Because the last thing we want to do is go back, and discount the sacrifices we've made over the last 4 to 6 weeks. I see, for example, I see people in my community driving in a car by themselves. They have gloves on and they have a mask on, and I'm thinking, is that too much? Or am I overreacting? Am I being too nonchalant about it? But I just think that if you're in a car by yourself, you probably don't need the mask or the gloves. But tell me, I mean, what are the kind of the common myths and
Well, those are, that one to address, as people get out and,
mm-hmm.
into society as we're trying to open. I know here in Georgia, the governor has released some criteria to reopen some things as early as today. But, if we think about what's funny is that he's still keeping the shelter in place order until May 1st at midnight.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be 11:59 on the 30th, and then we switch over to the 1st, and then the stay is shelter in place is dropped. But
Mm-hmm.
I know in my community, probably similar to yours, is what you're saying. This shelter in place has not stopped individuals from going out.
Right.
There's cars all over the place. And so I think that people are going to get out. So we need to think, what is it that we're going to do to protect ourselves?
Right.
Is a mask needed? Is a glove, or gloves needed that you talk about? If you're at home, you don't need those things. If you're in the car by yourself, you probably don't need those things. What you do need to do is be vigilant. You need to make sure that whatever it is that you're doing, you think about what it is and where you're going and how you are interacting with individuals, the site, wherever it is that you are. And ultimately remember to wash your hands. That's probably the biggest thing that we have to do. Wash, 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 wash. We tell young children all the time, oh, you should wash your hands. But as adults, we usually don't we don't take our own advice that we're trying to give to young children. We should wash our hands a lot more too. So we have to be mindful of that, and we actually have to make a true a true effort to do those things. Again, putting gloves on, again, what are you going to do? You're going to still touch everything that your normal hand would touch, and then it can get on the glove, and then it can start touching everything else that you touch. So
Right.
that can give you a false sense. If you're a healthcare worker, if you're a respiratory therapist, a nurse, a physician on the front lines, you need the mask, you need the gloves, you need a gown, you need a face shield. But as everyday Americans, I'm not really sure that you need all of those things. Maybe in certain circumstances that you would. So we just have to be smart about what we're doing and be more conscious and just wash our hands more often. And if we need to, we need to make sure that we're going to socially distance ourselves. We don't want to be around individuals who might have any symptoms, who might think they're sick. We've got to stay away from those individuals. But John, I know you're healthy, you're safe. I wouldn't have any problem with you and I being in the same room together.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate that. It's been tough. I mean, my mother and father live a few miles from me, and we haven't been seeing each other. Right? That they want to see their grandkids. They want to see us as a family, and I know that there are people out there who are really struggling. Mental health is staying mentally healthy is a challenge for all of us, and particularly those who don't have a family around them. I have a 4-year-old that runs around and keeps us entertained and happy all day long, and so, but some people don't. And I know that as some of the social distancing measures are relaxed, you know, I'm concerned that there will be not as much as adherence to the common sense. I think we can all be vigilant. We can all wash our hands. We can all try not to touch our face. And we're going to send a link to attach a link to this interview that will provide some helpful information for those people who might have some questions. There's a Q&A site or web page that is part of the respiratory therapy at Georgia State program. And so we'll make that information available to those of us who will begin to venture out and hopefully get our communities back together, at least economically, and we can begin to support our local businesses. But Doug, I really appreciate your time. I hope that we can check back in again in a couple of weeks, see what the state of affairs is worldwide here in Georgia and at Georgia State. But thanks so much for your time and all that you're doing.
Thank you so much for yours. I appreciate it.